more towards Israel. This was a mini comic that I did in my senior year. Just before that, we had somebody come in and asked us to do a comic about interviewing someone and documenting them. And I took care of this, a lady who was a Holocaust survivor who would come and read to her, and she would teach me Russian. And so I wrote about her experience in the Holocaust. And so I was trying to be very this is her riding on horses in the woods, escaping the Nazis, and it was about. It was really about. It was kind of a touching story because she said that she was escaping the Nazis in the forest in Russia, and they were riding horses, and then her mother pushed her into the shrubs, into the woods, and her face got all cut, and she said that her first instinct was she would rather stay beautiful and not let her face get cut because she had just met her husband, and she was afraid that he would see her, and that was the last time he would see her, and he wouldn't remember her as beautiful as she was. And then as she was telling me, her face, she was approaching 90, and she was talking about these things that have to do with beauty and immortality and love. And it's a great story, but I just felt this frustration of not being able to make it appear in my drawings. I just wanted to show this because a day before we had to present, just about my process. A day before we had to present. Oh, there's Machadi in the background. Anyway. So a day before we had to present the comics that I just showed, I was working till 4 in the morning, of course, procrastinating as an illustrator. And all my pencils were on the floor. And so they made a lot of pencils on the floor makes for a sort of like roller skates or a mother on her child's roller skateboards, like a Bart Simpson's gag or something, and I just bashed my head and all my blood. Sorry to show that. And there's my pencil box. Why am I showing this? Because of the trash. What?
It looks like you suffered for your art.
Yeah. And I'm showing this just because of the trash can full of the gum. This is my replacement for cigarettes. And afterwards, I used it here. So it's just to show the kind of. Okay, so after I did this one, which is my room and my mess, this is a salt shaker I keep by the keyboard because if I find these bits of food stuck into it, I would rather season them before I take them out. Anyway, it's a trip. So I started drawing this, and my teacher said I should draw more rooms. So I started doing this series of portraits of rooms for people, and that became sort of how I got to the start. Okay. So the second project. So after the incident, well, the really, it was a great project to do, but like I said, I had to steer away from doing something real and documenting. And I guess political is out of the question because you were talking about Marmara before the ship. One of my first editorial jobs in senior year was to do a very leftist, like the title was Israelistan or something, a very something he spoke against Israel and about the bloodbath that we had caused from the Turkish ship, and my assignment was to draw this Israeli Sabar, the little character, stepping into a bloody ship, and I was terrified by being, because that would mean that my grandparents, who are very right-wing, would get a newspaper. it's not for, it's too much of a responsibility. So this is my venture into the surreal. I had this professor in, so I was talking about comics as a perfect medium for stalking people around comic festivals. This is my professor, and he's really great, and he had an obsession with a Yiddish, he's an Austrian writer, but he also wrote in Yiddish, and he has all that Yiddish torment. The titles of his books would be Before the Dark Gate, and like Robert Searle's Souls in Torment, or stuff like that. Very gothic poetry and dark. And he loved him. And he actually has this diary that there was an article about him because he fooled people. He photoshopped himself that he met David Vogel in the 1930s in Austria and interviewed him. And people thought it actually happened. And he managed to live in both times, one academic versus into it. Anyway, he had this obsession with Vogel, and there would be this ritual of him calling attendance at the beginning of class. And my last project is about calling attendance. It's called Roll Call. It's my thesis project, my current thesis project. So it's relevant historian talk, I guess. He had this beautiful ceremony at the beginning of each semester, and that's why I enrolled into his class multiple times, is whenever he saw Vogel on the list, his eyes would light up, and he would ask that person, "Oh, are you related to David Vogel?" And it was just amazing. So I titled my next comic book Before the Dark Gate. It has nothing to do with it, that. But I just thought that if I would be carrying it around in Tel Aviv and he would see it, it would make him really excited or something like that. So that's the title of the next book. This is David Vogel. So I was in the Philadelphia Museum of Art recently, and I saw sketchbooks for Merce Cunningham's choreographies, and I come from, I learned his dances and his repertoires, and a lot of time quitting dance, a lot of years quitting dancing has become the single most painful thing I had to do, because it was like leaving this entire person, or an entire bit of my life was wiped away, and I didn't know, I had a really existential identity crisis. But then I saw these a month ago, and I was really excited because just the paper made me, I didn't even have to see the choreography, or I didn't have this eagerness to dance it out. I just really love seeing those lines, and I guess this is part of my transformation. And when I was dancing and making choreographies, I always used to write, if I had an idea for a movement, I would write captions for myself, what the literal captions, like a man standing over sunflowers and wiping his cheek with a bit of fox, so that would be a movement, and my sketchbooks would be filled with writing. And this is the one thing I still have today, that I guess this is how I do my comics. It's only writing of these phrases that I can think of as movement, and then I translate them into sentences, and then I draw them again. So they don't really mean anything, which is good, because I'm trying to escape meaning and avoid telling anything, I guess. Another inspiration that I always had was Pina Bausch, and this is a Swedish choreographer called Matzek. Sorry, this is Pina Bausch. This is Matzek. What I like about it is that half of the choreography or the composition is made with elements, or the stage. So the water is juxtaposed to the dancers' bodies, or the smoke, or you have a lot more than just your body. And the way Matzek breaks down the angles of his characters and characterizes the people in his operas not through story or narrative, which is what I was trying to experiment to leave out story narrative at all, but just have characters in a comic, but characterize them with shapes and angles. So because this dancer would have been dancing the entire show with that 60-degree angle, the audience knows to expect even when she takes her tongue out of her mouth at 60 degrees, because it has the same echo in her legs or in what she did beforehand in the movement. That tongue that's coming out would project all the way to the last row of people, and I found that really inspiring. That things are done with smoke, and it's just as much, the smallest movement can resound as much as the loudest movement. So these are, everything is incredibly parallel and geometrical, and this would be Pina Bausch. I love the idea of a giant rock on stage, or in her very famous piece, most famous piece, Café Muller, which was also the beginning of Talk to Her by Almodovar, where she has a dancer dancing blindly in a stage full of chairs. Or in another one of her ballets, as the curtain opens, 1,000 flowers just drop with a weight onto them. And so there's this surreal setting, but the audience is witnessing the way it becomes alive, and it makes sense because it has, the surreal has a beginning, middle, and end. The curtain opens and something is brought onto stage. Or if the stage is full of sand in another one of the ballets, then just the sheer time, it doesn't make sense at first. Why is the stage full of sand? It doesn't have any, it could be just for the sake of it. But then as the dancers dance and move through it, and it sticks to their sweaty bodies, and it makes them, and you can feel them growing tired over the sand, it makes sense. So in a way, it's telling a story through an abstract element, a story through time, or a linear story. So this would be my aim, to be able to do that through comics, to tell a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, even though it's abstract. So I'll start with this one. So I started reading Baudelaire's little poems and prose, and also Kafka's fragmented notebooks. So I am taking inspiration from authors, but Kafka's notebooks, Blue Octavo notebooks, are just fragments and tiny notes that he had made. A lot of times he's just starting a story and not finishing it, so they're broken stories. So I did a series of these broken stories that they kind of make sense that it's a story, but it's not really. So this would be and again the tongue. So I'm using this tongue that I keep on talking about, like in Matzek's ballets, mainly as a compositional element, because whenever a character comes onto the stage, onto the paper, there's a tongue inside him. Everybody has red in them. Everybody has blood in them. So if I need red for a composition, I can just very conveniently take out his tongue or slice him open. So my beloved wife served me soup. I watched a scene. Oh, I didn't have the title. Sorry. I watched the steam as it cracked past the window. A beautiful palace of steam where my wife and I would spend our days. Again, the smoke, which I showed earlier in the valley. She slapped me. Your soup is getting cold. And this thing is an eighth of a portrait of my mom, slanted because my dad commissioned me to do a portrait of her for her birthday, but he said it doesn't look like her, so he didn't use it. So I just use it as bits of background and every now and again. This is another one. I won't read it because it's in Hebrew and tiny. I'll do the Kafka piece one. Old and weary, I digested a hearty meal. My housekeeper came in and announced a guest. This was turning out to be a lousy afternoon. I cursed my housekeeper under my breath and settled back in my chair. I hope she was mistaken. Even my neighbors didn't know me, let alone anyone else in the world. She barely contained her wild laughter. There are guests at the door, she repeated. I stood back up. I stretched my hand out into the foyer and pulled a guest to my eyes. So, I don't know what I was doing. This says, hello Super Mario, come in, there's coffee. So I'm using boxes which are orange and ties which are red and smoke. Okay. So that's before the dark date, and there are many comics of it. Oh, sorry. One last one. The great poet and philosopher was a very lonely man who had to seclude himself from society that would otherwise be mortified by his hideous looks. He experimented with conjuring various forms of company. He was arrested after someone had ratted him out to the king, claiming that he was practicing witchcraft. While he was in jail, the king fell in love with one of the women he had made. He left the poet no choice but to undo the spell. And so the woman dissolved to dust in front of the entire kingdom. The king was upset, and so was the poet. Okay. Sorry. I'll do this quicker. So I was mentioning the stage full of flowers, and this is Pina Bausch's lead dancer, Dominic Mercy. The stage full of chairs. Okay, so remember this frame. This is him, I guess. So this is my next comic, and it's called Chronicles of the Falling Women. And I was inspired by a few, well, there are a lot of installation artists or dancers that fall as a part of their art. And I thought about, at first I thought about making, maybe I'll do it someday, but just a biography made up of all, one person that every day falls down, but that fall is part of art history, like falls that have been done as part of art. So if this person in her 40s falls off the roof, I would essentially be describing this Dutch artist, Bastian. I'm getting dyslexic with the name. It's either Bastian Ader or Jan Bas. Jas van Ader. Something mix and match with the letters. But he has a series where he just falls off stuff. So he stands on top of this is him. He stands on top of this building and he falls. Or he just drives his bicycle into, or he just falls playing sideways. So I thought about using all of these artists. There's of course Icarus. I have this, I made this mini sort of abstract version. But then I started thinking about what if just women, there was an epidemic and women couldn't stop falling down. And Chronicles of Falling Women. So I'll just read a few. At first it seemed they were just overreacting to mediocre art. As time moved on, they found it increasingly difficult to stay off the ground long enough to enjoy a baguette without tickling the nostrils of ants. Pigeons acknowledged the facts long before any human dared to declare it an epidemic, thus resulting in an uneven distribution of pigeons between statues of varying gender. They obviously prefer to nestle in the laps of the more stable men statues. The highlight of the day of the Ohio Turnpike workers was spotting yellow taxicabs. The woman would fall contorted over the protruding shark fin. When women landed on buses, they just lay flat and boring. This is them on taxis. Most Bart Simpson-obsessed children were neglected in their filth-gathering rooms. Mothers were afraid of impalement on account of spikes and all. The braver moths would come in to vacuum. However, they would do their best to avoid mirrors, as not to fall and break them, creating years of bad luck. They ended up vacuuming and looking absolutely hideous. Most restaurants were renovated into tropical-themed bars as an excuse for the waitresses to sport ridiculously oversized hairdos. They simply bounced back up and tended the customers almost uninterrupted. This is using Pina Bausch's blind women falling over chairs thing. Whenever they had to drop off letters, they would pack a suitcase with both summer and winter wear to carry with them to the mailbox. When they fell into it, they had to be prepared to whatever destination they wanted. All self-respecting billiard establishments hired professional magicians full-time to keep women off tables. Falling had its perks, though. There was no longer a need to use harmful chemicals to dye their hair. Tetris salons opened up when women assumed the colors of the shape they fell into. Ducks and other amphibians fled the water disguised whenever a woman came near, depriving her of the pleasure of feeding them for fear of suffocation. The lion tamer was most unfortunate. He could never concentrate on his work. Because, sorry, the frame earlier was supposed to be a trapeze girl falling down. What is this? Oh, there is a spinning bride. So she wears the dress on both ends in case she falls.